p.m. And we will call the special meeting of the East Bay Charter Township Board to order at 5:30 p.m. Would you like to do the same for the Acme Township Board?
It's 5:30, and we'll call the Acme Township Board.
All right, excellent. We'll go ahead and start. If you'll join us with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, excellent. Ann, could you do roll call attendance for our board?
Yes.
Here.
Oh, sorry, absent Steve Walters,
Present.
S. Forte, here, and Frank.
Here, thank you. Would you like her to do the same for your board?
If you wouldn't mind, there we go.
Amy Genema,
Here.
Dale Stevens.
Here.
Dave Coxey.
Here.
Jean Offerman.
Here.
Paul Scott.
Here.
And Doug White.
Here.
Okay, it's terrific to have both boards together. Thank you all so much for making this happen and making some time in your schedule for this. First, I would like to review the agenda for any conflict of interest. Does anybody on either board, if that's fine, have any conflict to declare? We are talking about a potential sewer project and CWSRF application this evening. Any declaration of a conflict? Okay, hearing none, we'll move forward to approval of the agenda. We will take a motion from East Bay's board. Would you like to take a motion from your board on approval of the agenda?
Can we do it just as one?
I
I don't know if you can.
let's just do it separate, and then that way we'll have it easily isolated if we need to. Okay, is there a motion and support for approval of the agenda for East Bay's board?
Make a motion to accept the agenda for East Bay.
Support.
Okay, motion by S. Cortade and support by M. Cortade to approve the agenda as presented. Any further discussion? All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed by no? Okay, great, go ahead.
Do I have a motion from the board to, for the agenda?
Sure. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, Amy. I'll make the motion to accept the agenda as presented.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ackerman, seconded by Genema. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passed.
Awesome, terrific. So we have an agenda for both our boards. At this point, we will offer public comment. This is a time for public comment, not for the agenda item. That will come under public hearing. So at this point in time, is there any public comment on any item other than the agenda item? And that could be directed towards the collective either board. Okay, seeing none, we'll move forward with the business before the Township Board. First of all, I want to thank several of the people of our consultants who are here, and I do want to point them out, and collaborators. We have from Wade Trim, we have Brian Souza and Joe Slanecki. Wade Trim, as you guys know, is the township engineer for East Bay Township. We also have Mark Hurley here from Gosling-Zubeck, and he is the township engineer for, Gosling-Zubeck is the township engineer for Acme Township. We have John DeVozo here, who is the director of the Grand Traverse County DPW, and Art Kruger, who is the City of Traverse City Municipal Utilities Director. Okay, good, I got that one, all right. And so,
Yeah, Tim Corson.
and Tim Corson, too. I'm so sorry, Tim. You, as I met with you the other meeting, you remind me of someone else that looks very similar to you, so I always think that you're that person, so it escaped me. So thank you, Tim, for being here as well. All right, with this, I think we will start off the evening. We will have the public comment, but I do want to have the opportunity for us to really learn what we are looking at with this project. So Wade Trim is going to provide an overview of that for us, and with that, I'll introduce Brian Souza, and take it away, Brian.
Good evening, thank you. It's amazing how many people will show up on a nice evening to talk about infrastructure and pumping wastewater and treating it, and whatever you have to do with it. So when I was preparing the presentation for today, I called Beth. I said, do you want the 1-hour presentation or the 2-hour presentation? She said, there's no 3-hour presentation. I said, well, we can make it that if you want. She goes, well, I'll see what you can do. So I'll see if I can get this done in 3 hours, but I might have to hurry. So thank you for your time tonight. I like to walk around. I'm kind of stuck behind this microphone. So if I get too out of range, just let me know back there in the corner. I'll try and zip back and get back in microphone range. So again, my name is Brian Souza from Wade Trim. I'm a professional engineer. I've been working with East Bay Township for a lot of years on their infrastructure. I've got Joe Slonecki with me as well. Joe is the crux behind all the technical aspects of this project. I'm just a pretty face here to talk and let him take all the credit. So, or at least I'm going to try and steal some of his credit if I can, but I won't tell him that. So, project introduction, what are we here to talk about today? So what I like to do in these presentations is kind of handle some of the questions that we would typically get and use those questions to present the items that we want to talk about today. So these are the items that we're going to cover. All right, what is the project? I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the infrastructure that we're dealing with today and the project that we're going to be talking about. How did we find out about it? How did this project come up? We're going to talk about options for fixing the issue, cost for those options, a selected option, and we're going to talk about funding. How do we pay for a project like this? So those are the crux of the items we're going to talk about, and then we'll have questions and answers. So what is the project? So on the screen behind you, there's a very small map that shows East Bay and Acme Township highlighted in green. East Bay on the south, Acme Township on the north. The black squiggly lines within that show the location of sewer infrastructure within each one of those townships. All right, the map doesn't do it a whole lot of justice. It looks like it's a small system, but in reality, the system the system of both townships is a fairly large system. You serve about 5,800 REUs. An REU can be thought of as a single-family home, okay, for general discussion purposes. So you're serving roughly about 5,800 homes. It's not exactly that number of homes, but for discussion purposes, that's how we'll present it. The small piece, and we're not talking about doing everything within this whole area. We're talking a very small piece of infrastructure within that map. And I want to just kind of point it out where that's located. And there is a force main, a sanitary force main that pumps wastewater from about this location to the regional wastewater treatment plant in Traverse City on the north end of Boardman Lake, right about where the E is, okay? So we're talking about a force main between these 2 points. That's what we're talking about tonight and what we're talking about replacing or addressing. Okay, so this is kind of a blown up map of that piece of infrastructure that I'm talking about. Okay, one thing I want to point out here, all of this infrastructure is essentially in East Bay Township, a small part of the city, but it handles wastewater from all of Acme Township and all of East Bay Township. So every drop of wastewater that you guys collect within your systems goes through this pipe, okay? And there's only one pipe, right? So there's about 1 million gallons a day of wastewater that flows through this pipe. 1 million gallons every day on average. So it's a pretty important pipe, right? So if it breaks, we can't just call all the homes, all the businesses and say, hey, can you guys stop using water for a week? We got to get this fixed because 1 million gallons is going to come down that pipe every day and you've got to deal with it. So if it breaks, we've got to find out how we're going to deal with it, how we're going to fix the issue. So it's a very important pipe. It was built in 1977. The material is ductile iron. It's just a steel pipe. It has a concrete liner in it. It's a very similar material that we use for your water mains in your systems. All right, concrete helps keep the water and the steel separated so you don't get rust in your water or as little as possible. It also helps with corrosion against the steel for sanitary applications. But built in 1977, again, handles all the wastewater for these 2 townships, about 1 million gallons a day. And one of the points that I've got on here, I've talked about not easily investigated. So when we're looking at a gravity sanitary sewer, all right, along those lines, there is a manhole in that gravity sanitary sewer, at least no farther than 500 feet. Usually shorter, but no farther in between manholes. Those manholes are access points to that gravity sewer. All right, so if we ever want to get in and assess a gravity sewer, we can climb down the manhole, we can run a camera up it, down it, we can clean it out, we can jet it. We can assess the condition of that sewer many times without taking it out of service, okay? With a force main, we can't do that, all right? Force main doesn't have manholes. If we have access points, they are sealed off until you shut down that force main and take that piece out and get in there and investigate. You've got almost 3 miles of force main there where the only points that you can get into and look at are the beginning and the end. And in between, you can't do that, okay? The other issue with force mains is you take them completely out of service for a length of time, and you can only run a camera so far from any access point, all right? So we really can't get into those force mains and determine their condition. So how do we do that? As engineers, what we do, we try and grab pieces of a puzzle to determine what we think the condition might be, what we think the likelihood of it failing might be. In this case, we use the age, we use any maintenance records, if there are any breaks, any leaks, any things that they had to deal with, what that pipe looked like when they went in to fix it, if they have had to fix it, and try and put these pieces together and say, all right, looks like we might want to start planning for replacement of this infrastructure. So the first issue reared its head in 2001, July of 2001. Of course, it's got to be July, right? The busiest time of the year. The DPW got a call that somebody saw liquid bubbling out of the ground. Might want to take a look at it. Well, upon further investigation, it was determined to be wastewater, and we just happened to have a force main right in that area. All right, so now what do? We've got 1 million gallons a day of wastewater coming through this pipe. It's got a break in it. How are we going to fix it and not cause a huge issue?
2001, you said, 2021.
Yes, 21, I'm sorry, yes,
That's okay.
21. Thank you for correcting me on that. 2021, so 2 years ago. So before you start a project like this, you have to have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, because if you dig down and your plan A wasn't ready to go, you've got problems. You don't really have time to start figuring out what plan B will be, all right? So the DPW and their selected contractor spent a lot of time planning how we're going to go about fixing just this issue, this break, on that force main. And so they decided to make the repair at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? It's kind of a low flow time. You're still getting a lot of wastewater, but it's one of the lower flows times of the day. And determined, all right, we knew what the material, we knew the diameter, we knew how deep it was, so made a plan of attack, had people at the force main upstream that pumps it all the way through here. They had to shut that down, shut down the lift station, pump that liquid that keeps coming in, no matter what you do, into a tank, then from that into trucks that would haul it to the wastewater treatment plant. Those guys are doing what they need to do just so that we can shut this down and the contractors can dig down and fix what they need to fix, or find out what the issue is and then fix it. It went very smooth. They did a great job planning it out. It went very quickly, very smooth. It cost about $100,000 for a quick fix like that. But the biggest issue that we saw is if you see the pictures of that pipe, the top of that pipe is gone. Those are holes in the top of that pipe, all right? So that steel is about a ½ inch thick, all right, and then you've got maybe 3/16 of an inch of concrete on the inside. That stuff was all eroded, okay? And the issue that we have with force mains and the pipes that serve those are, the material that's in a force main could be very acidic. All right, when they get into the force main, it becomes an anaerobic or a non-oxygenated situation. You begin to produce byproducts, the bacteria that's in it produce byproducts that are very acidic. Sulfuric acid, hydrogen sulfide. Those eat concrete and eat steel very easily and quickly, okay? So when you start to see things like this, we went back, took a look at the records when it was put in. We found out it was put in almost 50 years ago, 46 now. We start saying, okay, and it's the only line that we have to serve these townships, we better start planning for something for a backup plan, right? Because it takes a while to get all this stuff laid out. We started this 2 years ago, and here we're looking at funding, and then you got to do design and permitting and bidding and construction. So it takes a long time to get projects like this laid out and to completion. So those are the pieces of the puzzle, the age, the way that pipe looked when we dug it up. Is all of this pipe look like that? I doubt it, but we don't know for sure. But given the given the age. Typically, engineers will put about a 50-year life on infrastructure piping, gravity sewers, storm sewers, water main. Force mains typically will not last 50 years just because of the acidic nature. But this one has done well for 46 years. But again, it's the only pipe, so we need to try and come up with a plan of attack so that we don't have issues down the road. So what were we asked to do? So when we approached the townships, they said, hey, all right, let's take a look at it, let's see what our options are, let's see what it might cost, and then we start figuring out how are we going to pay for this. Sorry, I gotta stay behind this microphone. So this report, and this is the preliminary engineering report that we did. This is on the East Bay Township and maybe Acme's website as well. I don't know if it's on yours or not. But it's out there for anybody to review. You can come into the office, take a look at it, we can email it out, whatever. But this is the preliminary engineering report that outlines options, selects an option, outlines cost, timeframes, it's got mapping in there on where things would run. One of the things that's not in here that I was informed of before the meeting, in the route that the current force main is in and that we would follow as well with a new force main, there is some contamination that is in that area, TCE and PFAS. All right, that's not atypical of an underground infrastructure project or a railroad right away or a city, but we have to deal with that when it comes up. So any of the dirt that's dug up has to be handled in a proper manner, disposed of properly, things of that nature. But that's another piece of the puzzle that's not listed in here directly.
Brian, PFAS, and what was the other?
TCE, trichloroethylene. So that brings me to the last thing I wanted to talk about before I turn it over to Joe is, we're talking about costs, we're talking about options, and he's gonna discuss these options here in more detail. But just so you know, design has not been completed for this, okay? What we do is we do enough work, preliminary work up front, so that we know what needs to be done, where it might be located, how much it would cost to build. And then we start looking for funding. You don't want to do all the design and then not have funding to do the project. It just kind of gets things in a bad situation. So we do enough work to figure out what needs to be done, how much it'll cost, and we start looking for funding. So design has not been completed. The next step after tonight would be to submit the application to the state of Michigan. And then if we get funding, either through them or through some other sources, begin design and then go out for bid and construct it. So I'll talk a little bit more at the end here about different funding options and avenues. So, any questions for me before I turn it over to Joe, talk about the details?
Yes, I do have a quick question. Where was the break that you found?
The break was near, it'd be the west third, right by, I knew this was going to come up and I was going to look up, I forgot what road it was on, but
In
it's
Hastings?
West Hastings.
Hastings?
Parsons and Hastings, yes.
Okay, and then the acidic nature of a force main versus a gravity fed, why are there more acids?
Because in a gravity fed, you have oxygen that gets infused into the wastewater, and the bacteria that uses that oxygen produces a different byproduct than when you pump it into a tube. So when you turn a force main on, you'll pump a slug of wastewater a certain distance and it'll stop.
Okay.
Because the pump turns off, right? And then when that tank fills up, the pump will kick on and it'll pump that slug a little farther down. So the longer the force main, the longer the time that wastewater is in that pipe without oxygen. And the longer it is, it gets into an anaerobic situation, a non-oxygen situation, and that bacteria produces a different byproduct.
Sorry if you already answered that.
No, that's fine. It's all good.
Thank you.
Yep. Anything else? Okay, turn it over to Joe.
Evening. So, as we were looking at this project and where it was going to go, there comes a few options that you could do. One of the options not listed on the previous slide was the do-nothing option, because you obviously have to take the 1 million gallons of waste somewhere. So, if you don't do anything, further repairs, further degradation, more problems. The next option, replace it with in a similar location adjacent to the existing. Follow the same path, same place, and not identical, but close enough as it can be. Following the current route, we came up with a cost estimate of roughly 10.7, 10.8 million. That would be a directional drill option that would install it with minimal ground disturbances and try and keep all that above-ground infrastructure in place as much as possible. When this main was installed in the 70s, there was not as much development in the areas where the main is now. So looking at this option, there's some areas of concern, some things to look at. So in order to address those, it could be feasible, but the actual mechanics of it aren't quite figured out at this point in time because we haven't really done any design. Moving on to the next one, it's follow a new route, where most of the congestion and most of the utility conflicts could be. Don't know where all of them are yet, but that may alleviate some of those problems. This one looks like it came out just a little bit more expensive because the route would follow a roadway instead of a railroad right-of-way and a bike path. So as we look at the proposed project, the green line would be the same with either option. So that either option with more directional drill or direct bury, which is where you excavate and place the pipe. Similar alignment, same alignment. The other two options, there's the blue line. That could be a directional drill or a direct bury also. And then the purple line would be the alternate route that would deviate from the current alignment and come into the facility a different direction. That one would eliminate one railroad crossing and digging through a restricted right-of-way next to a railroad track and the back of some apartments, which is very narrow. Looked like it would be difficult to access. Not impossible, but it would be difficult. And this is just the blow-up so you can see it a little better where that route is. So the original one, you can kind of see the railroad track line that's below the blue line follows the green line. The force main right now pretty much follows that, and given some utility conflicts that we're kind of seeing out in the field just as a preliminary walk, there's a couple deviations to get around those. And then the purple line would be coming in from a completely different direction, and this one really hasn't been vetted with the city. There hasn't been much look at what utilities exist out there right now or if there's any room. But it should be something that's looked at through the design phase. And there was some benefit of coming up Hannah through the park because there was a lot of green space, looked like a lot of room to install a pipe. So cost comparison, follow the existing route and follow a new route, very, very similar. Slightly different methods of construction in different areas, but it didn't really seem to adjust the final price or the estimated price all that much. We did run a cost estimate to see what it would be to just build a new wastewater treatment plant at a different location. And generally, it's $12 million for a treatment plant to treat 1 million gallons of water a day. This is slightly more than that right now, so you have roughly $13 million for a new wastewater treatment plant, and then the entire system of both are designed to go to this main. So you have to take the waste from where it's currently started in the force main and take it someplace else. So on top of that would be the cost of another force main anyways. So to get it to another facility, you do have to build another pipe to take it someplace. So it is roughly double the cost. Project funding?
All right, so we talked about costs, we talked about options. How do we pay for something like this? So the three options that are listed on the screen are the typical options you would see for an infrastructure project of this nature. They're programs that are widely used by municipal engineers. First one is the United States Department of Agriculture Rural Development. They provide low-interest loans and grants for infrastructure projects, water and sewer projects. Grant money is determined based on the median household income of the area served and also the current rates that are imposed upon the system and the users of the system as it sits. Very popular funding opportunity. There are strings attached with each one of these. I won't get into any of the specifics unless you want me to. The second one is the State of Michigan SRF program, and that's the one we're talking about tonight. That's the one we're talking about applying for tonight. And the reason that one's kind of a biggie at this point in time is we keep hearing about ARPA funds and federal funds for infrastructure, and there's a lot of funding out there for projects. Well, in the state of Michigan, they are funneling those funds through the Michigan SRF programs. Okay, so they are getting a lot of those grant funds that they can dole out for projects. So along with those additional grant funds that are available for this application period, there are also a lot of applicants for this application period, right? So it's going to be more competitive than it normally would be. One thing that's good about this program is once you apply and you're in the system, you stay in that. If you don't get funded the first year, they move you to the next year and you're reevaluated with those applications. They'll do that for 5 years. Okay, if you don't get funded in 5 years, then you need to reapply after that point in time. Change what you're doing, do something different. But that's the big one right now. That's the one that's due on Monday. That's why we're here today, to put the final cap on that application and move forward as the township's desire.
At the end of your first year, if you didn't get funded, is there feedback so you know what you might want to tweak so that hopefully you can?
They give you some opportunity to make some changes, yes, yeah, with the new application period, yep. And then the third one, the last one I listed on there, are state and federal appropriations. Those are, some people call it federal pork or state pork. It can be a line item that one of your congressmen, senators, representatives get in a budget for the next year. It would be a line item that says East Bay Township, Acme Township, Force Main. Typically, those funds are given to you in a grant format. They're hard to get, but that's not impossible. It just takes a lot of legwork. And one of the things that they want to see before they would put a line item in an appropriation like that is that you're doing all these other things, looking for funds elsewhere, trying to find money, and not just going to them and saying, hey, we need money, can you give me money? So this is an important step of that whole process, whether we get funding for this or not. Okay, so what do we have on hand right now? Where are we at with funding? Well, the townships applied for ARPA funding through the county, and the county was gracious enough to pledge $2 million towards the project, okay? So if you remember, the estimated cost for the selected alternative was $11 million, so that leaves $9 million left over. I've got line items in there for the East Bay Township, East Bay and Acme Township pledged funds. That's how much would you guys want to pledge toward the project directly from each township. That can be zero. I wouldn't recommend it. You're better off if you pledge some, put some skin in the game. And then the final amount, so based on what that amount is from the townships, then we'll apply for whatever's left over to the SRF. If it's $9 million, it's $9 million.
If I could just interject there real quickly, when we have reached out to state and federal representatives, what our ask has been is $7 million. Doug and I have worked administratively with our consultants, and knowing that, you know, we need to have, as you said, skin in the game and have enterprise funds. While we have not taken formal designation for allocation to our boards yet, that $2 million collective total was a number that we were working with. And that distribution of the $2 million across the two townships is defined in our existing sewer usage agreement. So just to, we didn't, I just wanted you to know we did have a defined number that we gave for those congressionally directed spending requests.
Thanks for bringing that up. I knew of those numbers. I just didn't know if you wanted me to bring it up in the meeting or not. So I didn't know how far along they were. So if we insert $2 million for that line, that leaves $7 million left over for this application. And that's how we have it filled out at present, is a $7 million application. So, all right.
As a question on that, because of going through, I'll just say the dirt there, and there's PFAS in it, there's TCE in it, that's going to have to be taken out and put someplace. That's going to add another cost onto this, will it not?
It will add more cost if we did, it'll add more cost to the project versus if we didn't have to go through those, absolutely.
Correct. And that's,
Now,
is that figured in this project?
we add fluff to this application and this estimate so that when we see situations like that, we can address those without getting into trouble. So there is cost that's built in for items like that. Like I had mentioned at the beginning, when we go through right-of-ways or downtown areas, we see contamination quite often. So I'm not surprised by that information. So I'm not worried about having that come up in the project with the funds that, in the estimate that we have in the project at this point in time.
I'd hate to get three-quarters of the way through this, and all of a sudden you come back and say, hey, it's gonna cost another $6 million.
Yeah, right, no, I understand. And through the design, we have to detail that. So we would work with whoever has that information on the plume, where it's located, how big it is, how deep it is. That might be deeper than what we're going with this main. We don't know all of that yet, but that'll all come out in the design phase before we get to that, the bidding.
Very similarly, well, one, we like to call it contingencies, not fluff, but, very similar. You guys have all of us with both township boards have been through the DNR, Michigan Natural Resource Trust Fund application process. Very, very similarly, we need to have kind of a project scope and idea, but it's not until after you're actually funded that you get into the plan specifications and bids that are the very detailed crux of it. And so this is very similar to that. There's been a lot of tremendous planning work. I'm trying to remember the exact date. I didn't look it up from our minutes, but I believe it was in the end of 2021, beginning of 2022, when we authorized Wade Trim to do the preliminary engineering report. And then when that came back, we discussed, okay, where are we getting funds? And we authorized your funding specialist to do an analysis of potential funding sources. And then from that, we had discussions, drew in all the engineers and as well as the DPW, and the city have talked about it at BPW and within our townships. And then, so our boards both know, this past March, Doug and I attended the Capitol Conference at Michigan Townships Association, specifically to reach out to our state representatives, to start working with them on this issue. This is a huge project. It is a big lift. It's one where we would like to seek collaboration and partnership, and that includes funding partnership from all levels of government, local, county, state, and federal. And that's why we've been successful, thank goodness, with the county, and appreciate that, knock on wood. We have submitted for congressionally directed spending with both Senator Stabenow and Congressman Bergman. So we hopefully look forward to hearing further information about that, but they're going through their processes. And we've also had very good meeting with both Senator DeMoose and Representative Kofia, who, you know, as Brian mentioned, and he's exactly accurate, the first thing they want to know is, what have you gone through? What other funding sources are you looking at? Are you availing yourself of, you know, Eagle funding, the state revolving funds, all of those things, our enterprise funds, partners, and so forth. So we've been taking a pretty good path and dedicated process in doing this. It does take time. It takes a number of months, and there are still things that we have yet to go through in this process. And we're at the point right now where in order to submit for the CWSRF, we need to, having looked at all the options, decide on the option, and do some, get some public input on the different options, consider that collectively, and then decide what to do with the options in the CWSRF application. So I do want to offer an opportunity to John and then Art. But John, if you could just mention maybe some of the your experience with the fix that happened in 2021, and just some of the hoops that you had to jump through with that fix.
Matt DeVozo, DPW Director for the county. Well, first, as Brian said, planning, coordinating, just getting a plan together. It also involved the city, their operator for the plant, our staff, Elmer's. It was, and then middle of the night type of activity. Pump and haul, it's always stressful. Just making sure you have enough trucks and enough volume to handle what's coming through and rotating them through the process. And And then just, worry about what you saw on the ground and how far down the line this happens. The break itself was identified by a business owner in the area, but he was filling in the hole for years. And he finally came to us like, hey, I'm done filling in this hole. Something's not right. And we're like, okay, we checked it out. I'm like, oh my God, it's a force main leak. It's a big force main. It's a main force main. So again, the repair itself, the contractors we have, the engineers we have, the staff we have, we're capable of making these repairs. But what we're not capable of is identifying how far down the line it happens and, if something major happens and it affects much more feet of pipe than what we saw, that's a humongous task. So identifying the issue, coming up with this type of a solution, the DPW definitely recommends that and is behind that, understanding that it takes revenues, cash, board approval, citizen comments and stuff like that. It's not an easy decision to make, but from an engineering and from an operations standpoint, it makes perfect sense to get the project started and moving. And, if you have any questions that I can answer, I'd love to answer them for you.
At the culmination of this project, then you would have the opportunity as maintaining that system to be able to work with engineers, township engineers as well, to then be able to appropriately in the future document the condition of the system, correct?
Correct, and, I don't know exactly what it's gonna look like, but I assume they're gonna be parallel and interchangeable at times. So you can take one offline, get in. There's ways to do it if wastewater's not flowing through that. I mean, again, those are additional costs. Those are, again, not an easy task and not inexpensive, but having redundancy in a force main that travels from 2 townships, really through 2 townships, through the city to the plant. I mean, again, we protect the welfare, safety, and public health of our citizens. So, I mean, this goes a long way in that regard, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Did anyone have any specific questions for John?
Yeah, I do. Ductile iron versus HDPE. What's, with the new technology out there, everything I've heard, and I'm not an expert, but I just heard that HDPE is far superior in terms of longevity and probably pressure, hold. But I've also heard that DPW sticks with ductile iron. So, and I know it's still in the planning stages, but is this going to be a ductile iron system again, or?
I assume, yeah, but
Why don't you go ahead and stand up so we get it on mic?
ductile iron's old school, to coin a phrase. Of the new school, there's a huge benefit to plastic pipe. The townships have recognized that the DPW, in our specs, we allow plastic pipes. It's subject to township engineer approval on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
They'll tell you there's pros and cons to each, but plastic pipe doesn't do that, in my experience.
Anything else to add to that, Brian?
Yeah, so the way we priced it and the way we would plan on going forward is with plastic pipe and not ductile iron. As you mentioned, there's a lot of benefits to it. It doesn't corrode. One thing that we have to keep in mind, though, is when you get into situations like TCE and PFAS, we need to make sure that the pipe material is compatible with any of the contamination that we're going through. So that's a big step. But usually plastic pipe is resistant to those types of materials, but that's just another step in making sure we get the right material in there. But we would very much favor and have priced it as HDPE. On top of that, if it's installed by directional drilling method, which is you're drilling under the ground, you're not digging from the surface, that would be HDPE anyways, so.
Brian, could you talk a little bit about capacity of this line? So are we planning for the needs of growing townships? Is there sufficient capacity?
We are. So One of the things we have to take a look at is population trends and growths in the township and how, and a lot of this gets done in the design, but we have to do some of this in the preliminary phase just to say, hey, it's a 14-inch diameter pipe now. Based on the growth over the last 50 years and what we project over the next 20 to 30, should it be a 24-inch pipe, right? How big does it need to be? So we go through that exercise. The 14-inch diameter pipe that you have now will serve you based on your population growth over the next 20 years, okay? It may serve you beyond that. We're only required by the state departments to look at a 20-year growth plan. When we put the estimate together, we priced it as 18-inch pipe, okay? So that if we get into the design and we start getting into the details and we say, holy cow, we could get a 16-inch pipe would be a lot better than 14, we wanted to have that flexibility. So we wanted to price it as a higher, bigger, more expensive pipe. It's always easier to back cost out of it. So that's a big part of what we have to do is make sure that that line can handle what we expect it to over the next many, many years.
Okay, thank you very much. If I might, could I call on you, Art, to come on up? So as I mentioned, Art Kruger is the City of Traverse City Municipal Utilities Director. Art was integral in that repair as well. It happened in the city, although it was our line, and definitely a collaborative repair in trying to address the waste. Could you touch upon the repair just a little bit, but also talk about the capacity at the wastewater treatment plant? Because someone may, hear this conversation and say, well, that's great, the pipe's going there, but will there be the capacity at the wastewater treatment plant?
Sure. I agree with John. It was a very collaborative effort among a lot of different team members to pull off the repair. We double-checked things, triple-checked things, planned it for the middle of the night to have our best shot at keeping ahead of the flows. The city is under contract with the firm Jacobs. They are the operation and maintenance firm that we rely on to operate and maintain the wastewater treatment plant. So part of this repair, we were diverting water to another lift station, which was in the city limits that pushed water to the wastewater plant. So we had to coordinate with them so we weren't overloading that lift station's capacity. In the meanwhile, over in East Bay, they were pumping and hauling, as John mentioned. So it was quite a collaborative effort, and it went pretty smooth. And I remember seeing the punky-looking pipe on the ground and taking pictures of it myself because it was quite a sight. So, $100,000 in one shot, that's a lot of money to spend on a repair. I'm in support of redundancy as an engineer. In the wastewater treatment plant, there's always two paths typically for every process, so you can route all of it one way and work on the other side, flip flows around when needed. As far as capacity at the wastewater plant, we're doing pretty well. We have 8.5 million gallons a day capacity, and typically our flows are in that 5 million gallon a day or 4.5 million gallons a day range. In 2020, we had very high water in the Great Lakes. Groundwater was elevated, Boardman River was high. We weren't. The system was aged and still is, and we're working on that to tighten it up. But underground, we were getting some groundwater infiltration in clay pipes that are numerous throughout the city. We're trying to target certain areas on the west side that we know we had problems with that infiltration coming in. And then when we got the very large storm events in 2020, there were 3 that were very notable, like a 50-year and a 200-year storm, and I think even one was like a 500-year storm. High-intensity rainfall within a few hours, talking like 3 to 4 inches in a matter of 3 hours. The storm sewers weren't able to flow like they normally would because everything at the outlets was high, so you didn't have a lot of drop in the hydraulics in your storm drains, so it ended up ponding in the streets and in the ditches and things, and manholes then were kind of inundated for sanitary sewers. They were allowing some water to come in. So we did treat a lot more water than typically in 2020, and we did have a few overflows. To tie that into the city's approach, we applied for the CWSRF in 2021. So we made the May 1 deadline in 2021 with a project plan. We had a public hearing, just like we're having here today. We were fortunately chosen for about a $2.7 million project along the Boardman River. Downtown, we have a main trunk sewer. It's a 24-inch that takes on some of Garfield Township's wastewater. Elmwood Township comes into it, and then the west half of the city. It's about 2.5 million gallons a day coming through that pipe. And it was in jeopardy with the stability of that pipe because it was nestled right along the wall of the river. So they built it in the 30s, and it had sat on the foundation of that wall, and all that high water and high flow coming down the river was scouring under the wall. So the wall was in jeopardy of its stability, and we moved forward with a project in one of the blocks to move the sewer away from the river wall. And that project started just a month ago, and we're working on that right now, and we're hoping to be done by middle of June. It was a 24-inch along the wall. We're putting in a 30-inch, just like your engineers are proposing, looking ahead for, greater capacity for the long term. The other block involved, there was not enough room between the buildings and the river wall to move it, so we went after the stabilizing of the wall with new sheet piling right up against it, and then we filled in between the two walls. So the old concrete wall stayed where it was, and we put a sheet pile in, and that was very close, and then we filled in the gaps underneath with flowable fill, a concrete type mixture. And that project started last fall, and it's supposed to be done here in the next month. So together, the two projects were about 2.7 million. We were able to land it through Clean Water SRF, and it was a 1.875% interest rate, 20-year loan. Interest rates currently have jumped a little bit for this program, but if you were to just go out for a straight bond funding it, you're going to pay higher interest rate. But I'd say overall, the experience from the city that we've had with SRF has been good. There are a lot of steps involved, there are a lot of deadlines involved, and we jumped through a lot of hoops to meet the deadlines and actually closed on the loan last September. So in 2021, we were requesting the money. We found out fall of '21 that we were going to be awarded money. Design process started, and by September of 2022, we landed the money as far as closing on the loan, and then the project started soon after that.
And then for those who might not be aware, who are listening or visiting with us tonight, you operate through Jacobs, the regional wastewater treatment plant, which by contract is the 5 townships and the city of Traverse City. And we are guaranteed collectively, the 5 townships, of a certain capacity in that wastewater treatment plant. And then you're also investing in the improvements to that wastewater treatment plant at the same time, too.
Correct. We are currently out for an RFP that's due in May here, coming up, and it's for a design-build contract for the primary treatment. It's the upfront half of the plan, if you will. Improving old segments of the process, treatment process there, and we also are adding the very end process treatment, which is UV disinfection. And we're bringing those projects together because in this program, SRF, it's competitive, and it's basically a point system. So your project gets evaluated, and they give it points based on lots of different criteria. And one of those is an administrative consent order, gives you more points. The city did go under administrative consent order with Eagle about the UV system. and we have until 2026 to fix that. And it wasn't 100% necessary to go that route, but Eagle wanted to, so to speak, have the city sign and dotted line that we will have it done by this date, and so.
Helps you with points.
And yes, so it's not like we got in trouble by getting in a consent order, but we went that, Eagle wanted to go that route to make sure it was done by a certain time. And really, that was put out there at 2026 because there was some improvements that they wanted us to do, but we had about 5 more years of life expectancy in that UV system. So we bargained where we coordinated with them to allow us to live that, allow that last 5 years to happen before we had to replace it. So that's about 3.8, excuse me, 3.8 million estimated. And the primary treatment part is estimated around 19 million. So we're currently hoping, and we've requested about 24 million, and that's coming up in this 2024 request.
And there's, for the 2024 request, the last stats I saw online was 252 municipalities request, you're smiling, so you saw this too, requesting $2 billion in projects.
So the SRF project, or funding, has become very popular, as Brian mentioned. You know, even 3 years ago, before federal money started being given out to the states, there weren't hardly any applications, and I don't have the numbers at my tip of my brain here, but just an explosion of applications over the last 3 years, and like you mentioned, 256, and I think before that they were having like a dozen or less. But this federal money has sparked a lot of interest. There's a lot of need out there. So it's competitive, and in 2023 money, the city did not get any funding, so we had to push those projects out. So we're hoping in 2024 we can get some needed money for the wastewater plant.
Okay, and I want to also express appreciation for when we submitted for consideration of congressionally directed spending, we did ask for a letter of support. I had worked with Marty Colburn and with you, and Marty submitted an administrative letter of support for the need for the project. So we really do want to extend appreciation to the city of Traverse City and their collaboration and support with this. Thank you for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm going to bring this back to the board, and what I'd like to ask you for right now is very specific questions with respect to the project, engineering-wise, route-wise, any technical questions, although realizing we don't want to, second-guess engineers who are PEs and we're not PEs, but we certainly have a right to ask those questions. And, well, some of us are PEs, but, anyway. And also any questions on funding, but I want to get any technical questions without deliberation to these consultants, and then we can move to the public hearing, listen to that comments, and then bring it back to the board for deliberation. So are there any specific questions for anyone you've heard from tonight? And I would also, you heard from Brian again, and Joe Slanecki, both with Wade Trim, John DeVozo with the DPW, Art with the City of Traverse City, and of course, we also have Gosling Zubek with Mark Hurley and Tim Corson as well. And then Daryl Nelson, our one of our county commissioners, just stepped in, who was also instrumental in helping us secure the funding from the $2 million for the ARPA funding. So any questions for any of those individuals? Matt?
Yeah, Brian, currently you said it's a 14-inch main.
Correct.
And you said that your engineering is an 18-inch main. Is that what you're planning on doing, or you're planning on replacing just a 14?
No, it's 14 currently. And we priced it in our estimate as an 18 to make sure that we would have any additional pipe sizing that we find out through the design covered. We will size it appropriately based on the projections and the projected use. One thing that Eagle, or Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, they're the ones that permit this project, and that's one of the things they review, is to make sure that you're not overshooting or getting too big of a pipe, creating hydraulic issues, scour issues, and won't stay clean, or velocity's not fast enough. There's a lot of nuances to that. So it will most likely be smaller than 18. It might be 16, but like I said, 14 that you have now will serve you for a lot of years before you'd have to do anything, at least 20.
Yeah, well, my little limited background is the difference between 14 and 18 is a tremendous amount
It
of
is.
volume,
Yes.
even though it doesn't sound like it.
Right.
And the reason I ask is I've said this for years, for quite a few years, the growth was on the west side of town. But I think it's coming back this way, and it's coming back pretty fast. I mean, just look what we've got here. We've
Drive
got,
down Hammond Road.
just down here, we've got, 1,000
Right here.
homes going in,
Yeah.
possibly.
Right.
Which will all feed into that. So just want to make sure that we look beyond just what census data says.
Absolutely.
Because
Yeah.
it's important.
Right, I agree.
The same with the plant, I mean, it sounds like it's got capacity, but if it grows as much as this town could grow, are we there? And,
Okay, other questions?
I'm curious as to whenever this is built out, whenever that may be, what the plan is for the old line to, if you will, shore it up as a secondary system. Are you gonna?
Yeah, so what?
Great question.
Yep, that is a very good question. So what we would like to do, once the new line, if this all goes forward and the new line is constructed, is then come back at a later date and cured in place liner that existing force main. We did that exact same thing with the force main where Acme used to tie into East Bay and go into what they call lift station number 2 at the end of 4 Mile Road. We cured in place lined that force main for the downstream next 3/4 of a mile. And what that does, I should have brought I've got a piece of that. It's really quite interesting, but it creates a new pipe inside the old with a smoother lining, so that actually your hydraulics get a little better. Your pipe diameter gets a little bit smaller, but it becomes its own structural pipe. Hydraulics increase. But that, long story short, we'd like to rehab that line so that you've got both of those there to use. If there's a break in the new one, or, 40 years down the road or whatever, we can use the second one, or we want to clean that one, or we want to take a look. You've got redundancy there, especially on such an important line, to be able to use either one or the other.
What would, I know you haven't probably looked at it real seriously, but what would a rough guesstimate on something like that? I mean, 'cause we know what we're looking at to build this new, but.
Boy, I'd hate to throw a number out since COVID, because that stuff has all changed, and cured in place pipeliners are kind of a, anomaly. They're used quite often, but not often enough to be able to throw out a number. I'm trying to remember what
We were
our,
1.2 million on the last project that was done during the summer of 2020.
So if you-
How long was that compared to?
What was the length on that line?
3/4 of a mile. So let's say you tripled that length, quadrupled it, and doubled the cost for yeah, you're probably at $8 million.
But one of the things that we can do also, and correct me, Brian, but prior to that, undertaking that project, this gives us the ability to really go in and target and assess the condition of that line to know if there is a certain portion that must be done, sooner, later, other portions that can handle the continued operation, those types of things. And then I do want to add on to that too, part of what we don't know now, because we haven't done, all of the engineering plan specification bids, all that, is, they may have opportunities, because I asked that, we have 2 lines, is the only place for, changing the flow at the beginning and the end, and does it make sense to have intermittent periods? Yes, it does, but they don't get into the design of where that happens until you're doing the actual engineering of that, what makes the most sense.
Can I?
So, yep.
See, it looks like Mark and Tim.
I was just going to ask them to go ahead and step up and see if Gosling Zubek had some comments. Thank you, Mark.
Going to help out Paul, because we just did a smooth line cured in place, and it was 21 inch, a little bigger, but it was $53 a foot. So
Well, how much was that a foot, Mark?
it was $53 a foot
$53 a foot.
for a 21 inch. So this is a little bit smaller, so in that realm. So
Nice, thank you.
a couple bucks.
Is that, how long was that example?
It was 1,500 feet,
Okay.
21 inch in a. It was gravity.
How far can you run that?
About 500 feet?
Yeah.
And then that's it?
Yep.
So you'd have to
Then you
go 500
reset.
feet, dig down, cut and redo?
And that's why I asked if it was gravity, because the force main that we did, we had to go in and put in access points every 500 feet on that force main project, so that added a lot of cost.
If you-
It's right next to the road.
If you remember how annoying the traffic
Yeah,
was.
So I will say, you know, flashbacks to 2020 and explaining to people this is very different than a road project. A road project, you go up and you see Elmer's making a little bit of progress every day. You might see the person who stands and holds the sign dancing. It's very good feeling, right, when that road gets done. Cured and Pipe Place is very, very different. It's pits occasionally. They might be out there at 2 a.m. when something is cured. You'll never see them. You'll go past, the road's shut down, and you think, what the heck is anybody doing? They are actually getting work done, but it's just a very different project to watch. Mark, you left too quick. I was going to ask you and Tim Corson if you had any additional input or comments or anything. I mean, we have been involved. We've, Wade Trim and Acme and Gosling Zubek and East Bay have met administratively, but just wanted to give you that opportunity.
No, we see these guys too much.
I will say, I should have had it tonight, but at the trade show at MTA, the conference last week, I did go past Gosling Zubek's booth, and they were sure to give me a coffee cup to use at our next meeting with Wade Trim, so I should have had that here tonight, put it in the kitchen cupboard there. Let me just quickly, too, Daryl Nelson, do you mind just stepping up here real quickly? I just want to see if you have any comments, on the funding, and want to thank you for the collaboration and the vision to see this project and the need.
Well, there's a lot of smart people here that know a lot more about this, so I don't have anything to add, really, but I know that you guys have a big project, and the $2 million was just enough to start a problem for everybody. So, you're welcome.
Well, we really appreciate it, and we very much appreciate the administration and working with them through the ARPA project and the follow-up that we'll be doing with them. So,
We have every confidence that you guys will be able to comply with all the federal requirements for that, which, as you know, are ever-changing. So.
yeah. All right, very good, thank you. So with that, unless there's other questions, I'm going to open it up to the public hearing. Okay, let's open this up to the public hearing. It's 6:33. The attendees have been able to hear about the project. This document has been available and was noticed in the paper. It was online and so available here at the township for people to look over. So if there are public comments or questions, just please step up to the podium and let us know your perspective on this project. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hi, Brian Kelly, Acme Township. Providing an alternative to mitigate the substantial age of this existing sewer line is clearly a required health, safety, and welfare action. I do have several questions about the integrity and operation of the existing Acme Township force main that runs along 5 Mile Road. This is a line that connects all Acme sewer to East Bay Township infrastructure. Several years ago, that line failed, and fortunately, that flow was able to be temporarily rerouted to the old line. There was redundancy there, and that prevented a lot of disruption and I think reduced the cost of it all. What we never heard in that failure was the root cause of the failure, and that really concerns me. Our prior township supervisor, Jay Zollinger, who at the time I believe was the chairman of the County Department of Public Works, I asked him about this. He said it was a premature failure. The pipe was not old. He could not say why the pipe failed. He speculated it could be a bad pipe, that it might have been damaged during installation, that maybe they ran short of pipe. Never know, he said. I asked who the contractor was. He didn't know. He'd have to look it up. He said there would be no report on the failure. One of the first questions in any critical infrastructure failure is why. Typically, a root cause analysis is performed by engineers. That is essential to mitigate other similar risks with the pipe. This analysis is critical to protect health, safety, and welfare of the community, and it's concerning that this was never shared with the public or whether it was ever even done. So I'd also like to know who did that engineering and the installation. It can be important to guide future vendor selection decisions and terms. So my questions for the report: why did that failure occur? What efforts have been made to mitigate the risk of similar failures elsewhere in that line? Is this something we need to guard against elsewhere? Who did the engineering and installation? Who would be responsible for determining the cause of any system failure in this newly proposed sewer line? I can't imagine that we wouldn't, if there was a sewer line failure, that the engineers wouldn't analyze the failure. In this example we talked about tonight, it was an obvious thing: pipe thinning, corrosion. And finally, what period of warranty would cover the new pipe? So if we have a failure 5 years from now, 10 years, 20 years, it depends on the cause of that failure. But you wonder, those can be very expensive. So
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. For clarification, were your questions related to the proposed sewer line that we're talking about along to the wastewater treatment plant, or were you talking about the 5 Mile?
I was talking, my questions, my main concerns there, my first 3 questions were in regard to the Acme failure, which is, I believe, maintained by DPW and
Okay. Which questions did you have specific to this line?
well, this is all operation. It's the same agency that's doing the operation, so these same concerns apply.
Okay, so the warranty was the one that I heard.
Well, all of these apply to, all of the sewer infrastructure is operated by our DPW.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I'm sorry, Doug, did
I was
you?
going to say, this is on the force main that we're looking at doing, Brian. This isn't on the line from before. We're looking at this.
I
And that's
understand
what
that.
this here meeting is for.
Oh, I quite understand that, but this is the sewer line for both townships. It connects, and we had a recent failure there, and nobody can say why it failed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there,
That applies to-
thank you, Mr. Kelly. Is there other public comment for this public hearing? Yes, ma'am, how are you tonight?
Very good, thank you. My name is Sally Weaver, and I'm also at Acme Township. I just had a couple of questions, really. One, because I'm not an engineer. So if we're using the same force main, I understood that the only way you could check it is from at one end and then the other, but nothing in the middle. If we're putting in the exact same thing, is there new technology that's going to allow us to be able to check on it, say, well, this one lasted from 77 to now, 30 years or 20 years from now? Is there a way that we're going to be able to check along the line instead of having the same problem again, say 40 years down the road, or, the same amount of time?
Okay.
And then my second question is, if you're using plastic pipe, I don't know how much that is used underground, but I guess I'm wondering about the gassing of plastic pipes. Where does the pipe come from? Is it made in the United States or somewhere else where environmental issues could be, environmental concern could be an issue?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Weaver. Other public comment? Yes, sir, how are you?
Real good. My name's Craig Rundle, East Bay Township, and my question is similar to the first question, but it's really just about, I heard it said that the suspected cause of the original leak, but really truly, was there a root cause done on that?
Okay, any other comments?
Okay, so then the second one, yeah, if we're going to do the, now would you say the filler or the liner in place, would that be a separate project? In other words, the $11 million covers installing a line. Would you come back to, all the other agencies and look for money to install that liner? It sounds like it's fairly expensive, but
Okay.
yeah, those are the questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Rundle. Any other public comment? And with that, I will note, we will note your name and address as well for the record for the public hearing, so we appreciate that.
Can I just get clarification for Craig's last name?
Rundle, R-U-N-D-L-E?
R-U-N?
N-D-L-E.
Thank you.
Very good. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we will close the public hearing at 6:41. So we'll bring that back to the board. Let's talk a little bit about, Brian, if you don't mind, and any other resources that we have here. We could talk a little bit about some of what we had heard with respect to at the public hearing. So, for example, could you clarify on that line, how we'll be able to inspect the future line, and what will be different about this line that we don't have the capacity to do with the current line?
It's a great question. So what we would like to do with this new line is have access points installed while we're putting the sewer force main in. Okay, so basically what that would be is a manhole with the force main going through it. And where it goes through that manhole, there'll be what we call a spool piece, a short piece that's bolted in. So if you ever wanted to get into that force main, you've got to shut it down, right? So that's we got to have another way to get wastewater to flow through the system. So if you shut it down, though, you have a spool piece you can take out, therefore you can get into each end of the pipe. Now, we would put those periodically throughout that new force main so that we do have access points. Because that's one thing that came up when we were talking a little bit ago where Mark was bringing up costs for the gravity line. When we did your force main, we had to go back and install those access points every 500 feet so that they could get into that line and rehab it, right? So if we can put those in now, it's cheaper to do it now than it is to go back later and put them in. So we would call for those to be installed periodically throughout the system.
That's currently in the bid, or in the
That, yes, correct, yep.
So right now, there is that one line, and we don't have any alternate route to move the waste to stop the waste, and the waste keeps coming. And so that's, just by having the redundant line is a benefit, but then also these access points.
Right, correct.
Okay, very good, thank you. Could you talk a little bit about the materials that you use and sourcing those?
Yeah, so a lot of times it depends on the requirements of the funding agency. And right now, especially if you were going through rural development, they have a requirement, it's called the BABA, Buy America, Build America, BABA, it's an acronym, where we have to buy certain materials and a certain percentage from United States manufactured products. I don't know what they will impose on this SRF. I would imagine it's going to be something similar. But unless we're required to say you have to buy United States American or United States made products, usually we don't note that. We can, regardless, either way. But I don't know where they would be made. I can't really answer that question on where all of that would be made and how it would affect the environment.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. Let's see, I guess I felt the root cause, while we had breaks along 31, and that was the reason that we went in and did the cured in place in that instance, and we never could really determine if the I think it was 3 breaks, or was it 5 breaks that we had with MDOT when they were there? 3.
Right after, right after the road was,
And that really wasn't determined, was it construction reverberation, was it the condition of the line? It wasn't known ahead of time. With this break, I think that we are thinking that the break that we experienced in 2021 clearly was the condition and degradation of the line over time, correct? Okay, very good. I just wanted to clarify that. And also, there was a question on the cured in place pipe. That is a subsequent project.
that would be a subsequent project, exactly. I mean, if we tried to wrap that into this project, it gets to be too big, right? And once you get too big, you risk the opportunity of nothing happening. So we're better off going forward and installing a new main and then dealing with the old one how we can, in any manner that we can down the road.
And we can still operate the old main as needed, if needed, as long as there's no functional problems that we're experiencing.
And that one thing it may allow us the opportunity to do is go back, once the new main is in and it's operating, we can go to that old main that's not being used, and we can access it and assess the condition without ramifications of a problem. If we were to do that now with that live force main and dig down, say, let's just dig down and see how it looks, and holy cow, it's bad, and as soon as we lift the soil off, we've got a geyser coming out, now we just created a headache, right? So we don't necessarily want to do that, but that would afford us the ability to do that on the old line once the new one is in and is running. And we may find that it's great shape, and we only need to cured in place line a small section, or cut out and replace a small section here or there, and you're left with a very good operating line.
The Vegas odds on that, I don't think
That's
are,
probably not
you know.
good, right? I wouldn't bet on it, but.
Yeah, which is why we're all here. Let's see, also, once we construct this line, this alternate line, what is the warranty on that? And what, obviously, the previous line was 1970-some, 50 years ago, but once it goes in, what are we looking at?
Typical warranty on a project is 1 year. So once the project is done, we have the contractor post a bond for a 1-year maintenance bond. If something goes wrong, the bond would cover that. Because usually if you've got a faulty material or bad installation, it'll rear its head within a year. So typical is a year of warranty.
Okay. All right. So let's get down to the crux of what we need to decide tonight from this draft project plan that's in front of us. We would need to finalize this plan because the suggested draft verbiage chooses not the new plant, not doing anything, correct?
Correct.
Oh, and I did want to ask you to characterize one other thing. I did have the question of, how critical is this project as far as is this potential doomsday alert within the next 3 months? Or is this, something that doesn't need to be done for 20 years? The way I tried to characterize it to someone is, I give a lot of credit to the professionals and to our collaborators in that we're looking proactively at a project. One break in 2021 does not necessarily mean an entire 11 million project is going to happen. But we didn't ignore that sign. We looked at it to see if something needed to be done or not. So right now that system is operating, it is functional. There are plans and engineering guidelines on how you would deal with something if a break occurred, just like there was in 2021. So it is not, nobody should be sitting on the edge of their seat scared that something's going to be happen, but yet at the same time, we don't want to ignore issues.
Yeah, I wouldn't be losing sleep over this. But you're right. I mean, given the age and what we saw on that pipe when we dug down and fixed it, it raises an eyebrow, right? So we need to start planning for that replacement. But is it doomsday? We could have a major failure tomorrow. I don't know. But it's been operating fine ever since.
And it could operate for another 15 years without an issue.
Yep.
All right, very good. We do have, as we go to look to deliberate, oh, sure, Glenn?
Yeah, question. You mentioned about the contractor has the 1-year warranty that the work standard. Does the manufacturer, the fittings, the pipe and everything, do they have a warranty on it?
Yeah, that would be all part of that warranty, yeah. So if we installed the pipe and it broke, for whatever, whatever we were talking about earlier, and it was within that year, that would all be fixed and,
So the pipe and everything, even from the manufacturer, is only 1 year?
right, yep. Now, pump stations, sometimes, when you get mechanical systems like a pump station, which we're not really doing as part of this project, those are a different situation, but for piping and underground infrastructure, it's a year.
All right, thank you. I do want to take a look at what the potential decision we're looking at making tonight is, and then we can talk about whether that's a choice that we want to make. You do have some draft resolutions in front of you. There is an error on it. It says at a regular meeting. It should say at a special meeting. That will be corrected. We do have a resolution for East Bay Township. We have one for Acme Township. Technically, through Eagle and CWSRF, we only need a resolution through East Bay Township. However, I would propose that we would like to do joint or parallel resolutions because we've done everything in collaboration to date, and we want to stay in unified sync as we move forward. You can read the few whereas clauses, which basically just sets the stage for this. That is, it is an improvement to a wastewater plant. We do operate together in this joint line under the sewer system usage agreement, that we have worked with our engineers, public works, and collaborative partners in analyzing the appropriate engineering and funding mechanisms to address the current force mains challenges. We are looking at, to prepare this, that Wade Trim has prepared this planning document, and that we have held a public hearing tonight on August 25th. What the declarations would be for East Bay, it would be that we would designate the township supervisor to be the authorized representative with respect to the project with Eagle. That's very similar to what we do with DNR with grants and so forth. It also approves this draft plan as the final project plan for submittal to the state, and acknowledges our great and valued partnership with Acme Township. And the Acme Township resolution follows a very similar format. Was there anything notable, different that you noticed in the designations? Yes.
You mentioned August 25th.
Yes.
It's April 25th.
It is April 25th. What am I thinking? I must,
Summer.
Yeah, exactly.
It's so warm outside.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, we waited long enough for the summer, right? So with that, just open it up, if it's fine, to both boards, I think, right?
Yeah.
On comments or deliberation and the project and the potential for the resolution. Yep, Mindy?
So I just think that we need to add in section 5, information with regarding potential contamination that's along the line. We know that there is contamination where they used to make helicopter blades. Now it's the Career Tech Center. We have a TCE plume that is known there, and it's actually an ordinance in the township for water usage. We also know that the PFAS plume that we discovered, and I'm sure there's many more, but those are two that are very in your face, if you will. They've been talked about in the community a lot, so I just want to make sure that those at least are added to this, and I already talked to Brian about it, but.
Yep, good. Wade Trim or Gosling Zubik, do you have any comments with respect to that and whether the inclusion? The only concern I would have is, there may be other points too. I mean, I would think part of the process of what we're going to be going through, because this is not the be-all, end-all, is that we may discover other things, and that's kind of what happens.
Absolutely, and I'm glad she brought it up. We will note that in the report, but we will also talk about how we may handle other encounters that would come up along the line.
Okay. All right, very good.
Just a point of clarification on, when you say we're approving this is going through, do we have to designate which proposed alignment we're recommending during this? Or is this going in as is, and that's still to be determined?
So section 4.0, Joe, you can correct me or you can add, but on page 17, section 4.0 lists the selected alternative, correct, Joe?
Okay, so that's the one we're.
Yep, so
doing.
we're-
So when we say the project planning documents.
Yes.
That's just this whole thing. We still know there's more to come.
Yes, and because the alignments and the different methods of installing were very similar, it felt reasonable to treat it as the same alternative as compared to a new treatment plant or a do-nothing.
Sure.
So further engineering and investigation will determine the exact route.
Okay.
But
Okay, so that's where.
pretty
I
much
was
the same project.
Making sure. Got it.
Yep. No, good question, because this document does have to go through all those options to show the agencies that we have done that. It goes through all of those, and it's like, it gets a little lost sometimes in the end. It's like, okay, all of these options, and then there it is, right? Exactly. Any other comments, questions, or anything on the resolution? Yes, Jean?
I just had a question that, so everything we've discussed, including the high-density polyethylene, and it's hard to gauge prices today for the future, but this 11 million then, you're very comfortable that everything we've discussed would be in that, including a contingency?
So the project, the actual construction cost, and the estimate that are in the back of the report, there is a contingency built into that estimate of that 11 million, on top of trying to plan for future project pricing, looking at what projects were bid a few years ago, what they were bid last year, what they were bid this year, building in a little bit of fluff for all that contingency. And then, so, yeah, there should be enough contingency to deal with any minor problems that come up through the design phase.
So a follow-up question. Let's say that your estimating has been really good, some things change and you come in under that budget. Can the delta be used on anything else, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's specific to the project, so you couldn't take the remaining and use it in a park or on a road. If you wanted to use it on additional wastewater type work, you would
that's
have
what
to get the blessing of Eagle before we could do that, because these are
Okay.
project-specific funds.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So the relining would be out of the question.
Not necessarily.
That's
That
what
would
I
be-
was, that's what I was thinking.
That would be a very good use of those funds, and
Mm-hmm.
they would make the decision, but I think we could make an easy pitch, and it would be something that they could say, yeah, you know what, makes sense, let's do that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I do a follow-up? Have you seen that yet?
Yes.
That they've come in
Especially
under,
with-
and
yes.
they've been able to switch it, so they've actually done that in the
Yep,
past? Okay.
happens quite often, especially with rural development as well, that we can use it for other funds. So if we're doing a wastewater project, it has to go to wastewater. If we're doing a water project, it has to go to water, that kind of thing, so.
One of the things I want to stress too is we are not putting all of our eggs in one basket. Doug and I have been well coached by our engineering firms that the CWSRF, and we know from watching Art Kruger, because if you've loved hearing about the projects from East Bay and Acme and the city, I will say we have BPW meetings every month. Please come and join us. But one of the things we learned in watching the city of Traverse City go through this is that, it's not a guarantee, right? They got it the first year, they didn't get it the second year. We're really thinking our chances are slight this year. One of those is our average medium income, or median area income, I'm sorry, I'm getting, thank you very much, does not help us garner points. We don't have things like a consent, was it a consent order? Consent? So those things don't drive up the points, but, you know, it's still an option, and we want to make sure, and on top of that, it's a great process to go through to make sure that you're doing the right things and considering the right options. There's a reason they're making you go through all of this. So we're well set up and better prepared having gone through this system. So when I say we're not putting all our eggs in one basket, we talked about, you know, we're working with our rate analyst, where you look at our enterprise funds, we look at congressionally directed funds, we look at state funds, and we try to get all those pieces together. We're also very cognizant and working with the county and letting them know where we're at on this process, because those ARPA funds have timeframes tied to them. And so we want to be very cognizant of the time clock on those, and we want to be able to utilize those funds. So we're working the problem very diligently from all angles. Could I ask, is there anything, are you specifically from my board, are you comfortable with the resolution? Is there potentially a motion and support for that resolution?
I would make a motion that we approve Resolution 2023-18, a resolution adopting final project planning document for wastewater system improvement and designating an authorized project representative.
Is there support?
Support.
I'm going to go ahead and take a vote on that, okay? Supervisor White, all right. Motion by Bartlett, support by Walters. Further discussion?
We just need to make sure that that goes from regular to special meeting.
You got it. And Ann, will you do a roll call vote for us?
Sure. Bartlett.
Yes.
Walters.
Yes.
Lyle. S. Forte.
Yes.
M. Forte.
Yes.
Brennan.
Yes. Well, thank you very much. We've appreciated, I've talked a lot about everybody else's collaboration and how much we appreciate it. I cannot tell you that without the support of this board, we would not be as well suited to try and tackle this issue that we are. So it's very much appreciated. With that, I'll ask, would your board be interested in passing a motion on the draft resolution?
The draft resolution here. I'm looking up to see what our resolution number is.
Oh, okay. And we know that problem. We have that problem.
You have that problem?
We have. You know, one other thing I did want to note for people too, you know, you did go over the cost in this and have the amortization schedules. One of the things that the CWSRF makes you do is, what's the impact to your ratepayer? And so they really take a look at, okay, what's the $7 million spread out amongst that ratepayer? That would be the total cost of that $7 million. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is the cost that's going to happen. That all comes out when we have the final formulation of the funding. And I will just note, though, for those ratepayers, that right now, per households of sewer, we're at $26.42 a sewer for residential, and we have held that since 2015 at that rate. So, you know, I just wanted to offer that information as well.
Okay. Does anybody from our board have anything to add or support this resolution? We are on resolution number 10.
So I'll make that motion to approve Resolution 2023-10 for Acme Township A resolution adopting the final project planning document for wastewater system improvements and designating an authorized project representative. And that representative is going to be Beth Friend, the East Bay Township, right? Is that what?
This is the supervisor, yep.
Okay.
If you want, Ann can do a roll call if you want.
It's been moved by Jenema, seconded by Scott. Roll call vote. Would you mind doing that for us, Annie?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Hoxie?
Yes.
Ackerman?
Yes.
Stevens?
Yes.
And White?
Yes.
Well, fantastic. We don't know what will happen with this, but we really look forward to seeing this project progress, whether it's with this funding or other funding. And I don't mean it, if I'm using the word right, tritely, right, or insincerely. I really do appreciate the collaboration that we have going on in this room, from the parties who are responsible to the parties that we work with, and the public. Really appreciate it very much, so.
Yeah, thank you for getting together on short notice on a special night, so appreciate that. Next steps from here, we'll be making some adjustments to the report as noted, and this will be submitted before May 1st, which I believe is Monday or Tuesday next week, so. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we will just offer another opportunity for public comment. And this is, again, for comment on items other than the agenda item which we had during that topic. Is there any public comment? Okay. Well, is there any objection, or then we're adjourned if there's no objection.
Adjourn.
Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good evening.